Greetings, I'm Ari. What if I told you that there is a group of people hidden in the jungles of Northeast India who, for thousands of years, have been singing songs about a city they have never seen? Songs about Jerusalem, songs about a Jordan River that their grandparents never crossed. You would probably think it's a legend, but what is happening this week in the government offices in Jerusalem is not a legend. It's state policy, it's budget, and it's a race against time. The government of Israel has just approved a historic operation to bring home the last 5,800 members of the Bnei Menashe community before the year 2030 Tondisinpan. And I want you to pay attention because this story is not just about migration, it's about how an identity survived. 2,700 years of exile without internet, without books, and without rabbis. Today, we're going to take apart this puzzle. We're going to see why Israel is spending millions right now. What's really happening in India that makes this rescue necessary? And most importantly, the evidence. How do we know they're not anthropologists who left the rabbis speechless? The answer lies in the details that history forgot, but they remembered. Let's get to the point. Let's start with what was just signed. The Israeli cabinet, with Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Minister of Aliyah and Integration, Ophir Sofer, have given the green light to an unprecedented plan. We're talking about a special budget of no less than 90 million shekels. The goal is clear and has an expiration date to bring the entire remaining Bnei Manashe community. 1,200 people will arrive before the end of 2026 in a first wave, and the remaining 4,600 will come before the end of 2030. Now, a vital clarification to understand the full picture. They won't be the first. In the last 2 decades, thanks to private organizations and special permits, a few had already arrived in Israel, and today, because they've had children, there are now 4,000 Bnei Manashe living in Israel. That's why it's possible today to see their children serving in the Israel Defense Forces, since there's an established community here. But what changes today, and this is what's historic, is that they're no longer small groups arriving little by little. It's the state saying, we're going after everyone who's needed, no one gets left behind. Those were exactly Netanyahu's words. But why the rush? Why now? Because this is actually a rescue mission. I have to show you on the map. To the state of Manipur in northeast India on the border with Myanmar. That region is burning, literally. A violent ethnic conflict between the majority Meitei and the minority Kuki, the tribal group to which the Bnei Menashe belong. We're not talking about street protests. We're talking about burned villages. We're talking about synagogues, yes, synagogues in India, that have been set on fire and destroyed by violent mobs. There are dead, there are displaced people, and there is a Jewish community caught in the crossfire.
The Israeli government knows.
And in the official statement, although they use rather diplomatic language, they explicitly mention ethnic tensions and the need to speed up relocation. Netanyahu said a phrase that sums up the spirit of this operation: no brother of ours will be forgotten. So context number one, Israel is getting its people out of a war zone. But this is where the story gets interesting and fascinating. And this is where I want you to open your mind for a moment, because we're going to get into the realm of anthropology and faith. For years, skeptics said it's impossible. 27 centuries have passed, 2,700 years, since the Assyrians exiled the 10 northern tribes of Israel in 722 before Common Era. They mixed in, they disappeared. These farmers from India can't be Israelites? Genetically, that's true. It's very hard to find the trace after so many mixed marriages over millennia. But when rabbis and researchers like Rabbi Eliyahu Abihai arrived at these remote villages in the 1980s, what they saw made their blood run cold. They didn't find Judaism, of course. They didn't find Stars of David on the doors, nor the famous Hanukkot, the 8-branched candelabras. And do you know why? Obviously, because when their ancestors were exiled, Hanukkah hadn't happened yet. I'm referring to the Great War, the story of the Maccabees, which happened centuries after they had left Israel or were exiled from Israel. We are explicitly referring to all the northern tribes of Israel, among them specifically the tribe of Manasseh, known in Hebrew as Manashe or Menashe. They didn't know the Talmud because the Hebrew Talmud was written 1,000 years after their departure. What they found was something much purer. They found the pre-exile Bible frozen in time. Let me make a quick aside, then we'll continue. If you like music, and especially if you would like to hear the Psalms of King David sung in Hebrew and Spanish, I invite you to visit the channel La Voz de Sion, a beautiful project developed by my daughter and my wife, which I'm sure you will like. Of course, subscribe and share the channel with anyone you think will enjoy it. I assure you that you'll be pleasantly surprised. Pay attention to these four tests. First, the Passover sacrifice of Pesach, as it's known in Hebrew, without knowing it was Passover, that they were doing Passover. The priests of the village performed a specific ritual once a year. In the spring, they would take an animal, sacrifice it, and were obsessively, meticulously careful not to break a single bone of the animal. Does this sound familiar in the biblical context? Of course, it's exactly the instruction we find in the sacred texts about the Korban Pesach, the Passover sacrifice, in the book of Shemot, in the book of Exodus. They didn't know how to read Hebrew, but they knew that this ritual was performed in the spring, to the Song of the Red Sea. They have an oral tradition, ancient songs in their language, Misokuki, that don't talk about Hindu gods or jungle spirits. They talk about a people who crossed the sea that parted in two. They talk about brothers called Manmasi. Linguistically, they realized that Manmasi is the phonetic corruption of Manasseh. For millennia, they have called themselves, among themselves, the children of Manasseh, in their songs and in their stories. Third, mourning and clothing. They have very specific mourning laws and family purity rituals that match biblical law. Their traditional garments have designs and fringes on the four corners of their clothes, which match the biblical command to put fringes on the edges of garments. Although they didn't know what we now modernly call the tzitzit fourth.
The SE circumcision is the strongest point.
Despite being surrounded by Asian cultures that do not practice circumcision, the Bnei Menashe maintained this practice for centuries. They did it on the 8th day, just as the Torah, the law of Moses, commands. Even when it was dangerous, even when they didn't understand why they were doing it, because that's how the fathers of our fathers did it. So, well, all of this can't be made up. A group doesn't just wake up one day in the jungles of India and decide not to break the bones of an animal in spring and circumcise their children on the 8th day by chance. This is nothing more than the muscle memory of a people. That's why in 2005, the great Sephardic rabbi of Israel, Shlomo Amar, did something historic. He issued a ruling recognizing them as the seed of Israel. The seed of Israel, and he said literally, they are not Jews according to strict rabbinic law today, because the chain was broken, but without a doubt, they have Israelite roots. That's why when they arrive in Israel, they go through a conversion process to formally reconnect. It's not a conversion of someone starting from scratch, it's a return home. And at this point, it's impossible not to wonder, is this a unique case? Are they the only lost ones who have returned from the famous tribes of Israel? The answer is a resounding no, and this is what validates this story even more. Israel already experienced this just a few decades ago when the Beta Israel, as the Jews of Ethiopia are known, were discovered. For centuries, in the mountains of Africa, there lived a black community that kept the Sabbath on Saturday. That is, they followed all the dietary laws as commanded by the scriptures, the Bible, and considered themselves descendants of the tribe of Dan. The world laughed until the 1980s and 1990s. In movie like secret operations such as Operation Solomon, which is very famous, Israel sent jumbo jets and rescued thousands of them in nighttime airlifts. Today, there are more than 150,000 Israeli citizens. And there are even more mysterious cases like the Lemba tribe in Zimbabwe and South Africa. They also claim to be Israelites. And in the 1990s, science came into play. Genetic studies found that their priestly clan, which they call the Buba clan, has the modal haplotype.
Cohen, what is that?
It's a specific genetic marker shared by the descendants of Aaron, the Jewish priests who survive to this day. That is, they were not lost throughout the history of these 2000 years. In the first century, according to the writings that exist, they appeared, and to this day, it is still known who they are. So it's very easy to detect the genetic footprint that they have. So some Africans in the south of the continent have the same priestly DNA as a Rabbi Cohen from Jerusalem. So no, the Bnei Menashe are not an isolated fantasy. They are another piece of a global puzzle that is coming together before our eyes. The lost pieces of Israel are appearing. Now let's go back to 2025. We've already understood who they are, that they're not the only ones, and why we need to get them out of India. But what is Israel going to do with almost new people? This is where Prime Minister Netanyahu and Minister Zofar's strategy plays a role. They are not going to take them to Tel Aviv. They are not going to take them to Eilat in the south of Israel, to this paradisiacal tourist city. The official plan says Nof Agalil, and this is the north. I want you to visualize the map of Israel. Galilee is the north. It's a beautiful mountainous area but demographically complex. There are large Arab and Israeli populations, and it's our border with Lebanon and Syria. For years, there has been a national policy to Judaize Galilee, or rather to strengthen the Jewish presence there. The Bnei Menashe are not immigrants looking for the comfort of a cafe in Tel Aviv. They are tough people, mountain people, hardworking people. The government sees them as the perfect human capital to strengthen the north. And they are more than willing and ready to go. In fact, reports say that their adaptation is remarkable. Their children, those who were born in bamboo villages, now wear the olive green uniform of the Israel Defense Forces. There are Bnei Menashe soldiers right now in Gaza and on the northern border. One of them, Anog, said in an interview, "We do our best to serve the country and the God of Israel. They don't come to receive subsidies, they come to serve, and that here in Israel is worth gold." Now I know that many are thinking, and I'll be honest as always, Ari, and everything is just perfect. They arrive and that's it. The answer is a resounding no. Integration is very tough and it's difficult. Imagine the culture shock. They come from rural areas of India to a high-tech, noisy, and expensive country like Israel. Past arrivals already faced problems. Language barriers, trouble finding good jobs, and young people feeling lost between two worlds. But this time the plan is different. The government has learned from the past. This operation, starting with the 2025 agreement, aims to attract the first participants in 2026. It eliminates private intermediaries like certain organizations here in Israel that work with this, bringing new Jewish migrants from all over the world, and puts the state directly in charge. There will be direct absorption centers, Ulpan extended Hebrew classes, and social support for 15 years. Israel doesn't just want to bring them, it wants them to succeed. And I, for my part, want to leave you with a thought. We live in a cynical world filled with news of death, war, and corruption. But what we're going to see in the next 5 years is a biblical miracle broadcast live. We're going to see planes landing at Ben Gurion. We're going to see elderly people getting off and kissing the hot asphalt of Tel Aviv, crying because their grandparents and their grandparents' grandparents dreamed of this moment in the jungles of Manipur. Isaiah chapter 43 says, "I will bring your descendants from the east." Manipur is to the east, exactly to the east. Israel is bringing back its lost children. And by doing so, it reminds all of us why this state exists. Not only to defend itself, but to be a home for anyone who carries that spark of identity, no matter how much time has passed. So, alright, this is the analysis. If you liked it and value what we do on this channel, then I ask you to subscribe to the channel. If you haven't done it yet, don't leave without giving us a like and tell me in the comments. Do you think there are more lost tribes waiting to be found? Because the promise is there. I'm Ari from Israel, watching how history is written before our eyes. See you.